Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, of course, many thanks for invitation and opportunity to present scope of services and fees in Slovenia. So, being the last speaker, I do hope that I will be able to tell you something you haven't heard before. A few years ago, when ordering services in field of architecture in Slovenia, it was much like ordering in Asian restaurant. We had the faint idea of what is what, but we didn't really know. So, to clear out what we are ordering and eating, we need descriptions of the meals, and of course, we need the prices. And to cook the meal, we also need the recipe. And of course, there are side orders and desserts. Likewise, for successful implementation of architectural services, we need to define scope of services with descriptions of services as well, fee calculation rules, detailed content of architectural plans, which we didn't have, and instructions for drawing architectural plans, which we didn't have either. So these two drawings remind us that the fact that the floor plan is a cross-section of an object with a horizontal plane was once something yet to be discovered. On the first drawing, we can see rudiments of a floor plan drawn even to scale, whereas on the second drawing, we can only see some parts of the drawing drawn in floor plan and some parts drawn in frontal view like a child would do. That means that the rules for drawing plans must be defined, and these are the last drawing instructions that we had in Slovenia. They were part of the old Yugoslavian standard, the use standard, as maybe some of you may remember. As for the evaluation of services, a few years ago, we only had this very simple calculator based on investment value. I should also add that in Slovenia, the legislation is constantly changing. Here is the list of the changes in last years. As you can see, it changes almost every 2 years, and these are not some minor changes, but quite major. So in last 4 years, we had 2 big changes of the Building Act. That means, of course, that all the bylaws are changing and so on. In addition, the latest version of Building Act define only what is needed for building permit application and some basic contents of the detailed design or construction phase plan. Everything else was left to interpretations. For all these reasons, the Chamber of Architects of Slovenia decided to prepare the standard of the Slovenian Chamber for Architecture and Spatial Planning. So this is not a part of our national standard, it's a standard made by our chamber. Today it consists of 6 volumes that cover all the 4 points that I spoke before. They are written for architecture and for landscape architecture. So the drawing guidelines show us how to draw different architectural elements, like stairs, windows, doors, etc. I'm sure a lot of other countries had that before. For us, it was something new. And the same goes for open space design elements. Then we have building plan details content, which deals with detailed descriptions of architectural plans as which drawings had to be drawn and in which scale and so on. And the same for the landscape architecture. But since drawing plans is not the only service in the field of architecture, an elaborate scope of all services is needed to address all other tasks, such as, for example, preparing a sketch for agreement on temporary easement, as the one that's on the picture, or preparing some commercial drawings, etc. So therefore, the standard with scope of services was created that covers the whole life cycle of built asset. And to do this, we had to find the basis with defined stages or phases in the life cycle. We were considering several options. The first was the cijena standard, the international standard, which is the only one that is used more or less throughout the European community. The second was the plan of work of the Royal Institute of British Architects. And the third was the scope of services, a draft made by Architects' Council of Europe. So in this comparison table, you can see that there are not so many differences among them. And finally, we followed the international cijena standard because it is most comprehensive and covers all the phases. For defining the detailed descriptions of services, we followed the logic of the German tariff regulation, the Hawaii, adapting the idea of basic services and special services. So this is the result. The scope of services for each stage and substage in lifespan of assets, divided to basic and special services. The last volume of our standard deals with the evaluation of services. We determined the rules for evaluating services and developed a calculation application we call archigram, and looks pretty much the same as the food menu that I showed before, because you can check simply by clicking the boxes of what you're ordering and what you're not. So prior to archigram version 4, which I showed before, we had very basic method of calculation. But in version 4, we developed more elaborated way of calculating fees based on construction costs, facility type, complexity of the task, and based on this data, the fee in euro was calculated. So that was the first version that we had. But after the decision of the European Court of Justice regarding the German tariff regulation Hawaii in 2019, we developed version 5, in which the number of standard hours for specific task was calculated. Since the value of one standard hour was not determined, we believed that the disputed article of the Directive of European Council on services in the international market was not violated. But since the number of standard hours depended mainly on construction costs, there was a huge problem when the prices in building industry rose abnormally, like they did after the war in Ukraine started. So if in 2020 the construction cost of a building was 1 million, 800 standard hours were required for architectural plans, while for the same building in 2022, given the higher construction costs, more than 1,000 standard hours were required, and that was not very convincing for clients. That is why we developed yet another version of archigram, the version 6. In this version, instead of construction costs per square meter, we introduced standard hours per square meter. In combination with the facility type and complexity, the number of standard hours is calculated. That means that up to this point, no financial value is used, which means that this method is resistant to any market fluctuations and can be used almost worldwide. Since the value of one standard, So, the most important part of this method is the number, of course, of standard hours per square meter of gross floor area. In our suggestion, it is not a constant value, but a variable determined by the size of the building, the type of the building, and the overall complexity of the task. This is I think, very important because we can probably agree that designing a warehouse requires considerably less time than designing an apartment building with the same gross floor area. But also, designing a smaller apartment building requires more time per square meter than designing larger building with repetitive elements. Therefore, it is crucial to determine different values of standard hours per square meter for different situations. Now, I'd like to briefly show you how it looks. It is divided into several parts, which means that if you have a more complex building, you can put in data for each part separately. For example, like here for apartments, it has several parts so that you can describe more precisely all the data about the building, and you can put in different complexity and different facility type for different parts. And based on the input, you get the number of the standard hours, and the background of it looks similar as the Hawaii, only that we have a number of hours per square meter of gross area instead of the euros or like it was before. So there you can see that the number of hours is decreasing with the size of the building and is increasing with the complexity of the project. I think the numbers that are given here are arguable, are a matter of discussion, but the system is, we think, the right one. So, for achievements we had in Slovenia, we managed to do it so that the Archigram 5, the previous version, because the one that I showed you is still in development, it still needs the testing and so on. So the previous version is used to calculate fees for projects resulting from public architectural competitions, which for us is very, very good, and we are quite proud of it. And we are keeping regular courses about the use of standard for members of the chamber, and also we use it for professional supervision, which the chamber has to do among the members. So for conclusion, the establishment of a standard of the rules of the rules of the profession is essential for enabling comparable services, obtaining comparable offers, preventing dumping, encouraging employment in architectural offices, which is a huge problem in Slovenia, and also improving the social and material position of architects, not to mention to improve the quality of the work that we do. They must include all those 4 aspects, because only the fee calculation is not enough if you cannot say what is really a good project and what it's not. So if you don't have the backgrounds, it's not enough to only to talk about the fees. So if we master this right, I think that everyone will be eating from our hands. So thank you.